Welcome to the Progress Zone podcast, where we help you create real momentum in your mindset, business, health, and life. I'm your host, Jody Donaldson, and every week we'll explore the small, intentional steps that lead to big, lasting growth. This isn't about hype, it's about habits. So let's get started. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. If you've been showing up, doing the work, and staying consistent, checking all of the boxes, but something still feels off, like you're moving, but not really getting where you thought you would, I want to spend a little time in that space today because it's a place a lot of people reach, but not many people actually stop long enough to understand what's really going on. And if you don't catch it, you can spend years doing the right things, but in the wrong direction. There's a moment that happens for a lot of people, and it's usually a quiet one. Nothing dramatic, nothing falls apart. On paper, everything looks fine, but internally, something shifts. You start to notice it in small ways. You hit a goal and it doesn't land the way you thought it would. You make some progress, but it doesn't feel as satisfying as it should. You stay disciplined, but it starts to feel heavier than it used to. And somewhere in the background, a thought shows up. Why doesn't this feel better? That's a strange place to be because you've been doing what you're supposed to do. You've been consistent. You've been putting in the effort. You've been showing up. And most of what you hear out there sounds like, just stay consistent, just keep pushing, just work harder. But if you step back for a second, what if it's not about effort? What if it's about direction? And when you really look at it, it's possible to be disciplined, consistent, and committed, and still not feel aligned with what actually matters to you. And when that happens, progress starts to feel like pressure. Let me ask you something. Not what are you doing right now, but why are you doing it? Why are you chasing the goals you're chasing? Why are you holding yourself to the standards you've set? Why does it matter so much? And not the quick answer, the real one, because most people don't spend much time there. They just keep moving, and movement feels productive, but movement without direction can quietly take you somewhere you never intended to go. And when you start to pay attention to it, you'll notice a few patterns that tend to show up. Not all at once, not always obvious, but they're there. One of the first things you start to notice is how often it's tied to validation. You're putting in the work. You're showing up. You're doing what you said you were going to do. But underneath that, there's something you're trying to prove. Maybe it's to other people, or maybe it's just to yourself, but that you're capable, that you're successful, that you belong, and that you're enough. And the tricky part is that kind of drive can look exactly like discipline from the outside, but it feels very different on the inside because validation doesn't really settle. It just moves. You hit one level and it's not quite enough. You reach one milestone and there's another one waiting. And instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel like you need to keep going. And when your drive is built on proving something, it's hard to ever feel like you've proven enough. Something else that starts to show up is how easy it is to build your life around what makes sense. Not necessarily what feels right, but what looks right, what's logical, what's practical, what's expected. You make the smart decisions. You take the opportunities in front of you and you follow the path that seems like the next step. And over time, you build something that works. From the outside, it checks all the boxes. But internally, there's a disconnect that's hard to explain. You can build a life that makes perfect sense and still feel like something isn't quite right living it. And then there's this part, and this is the one that usually takes a little more honesty. Sometimes staying busy feels like progress, but it's really just keeping you from slowing down long enough to ask better questions. Because when things get quiet, certain thoughts tend to come up. Maybe it's a decision you've been putting off or a direction that doesn't feel right anymore. A change you know might be necessary. And instead of sitting with that, it's easier to stay in motion, to stay productive, stay consistent, and stay on track. Sometimes staying busy isn't about moving forward. It's about not having to stop and look too closely. And this is where the idea of progress can get a little misleading. because not all movement is meaningful and not all effort is aligned. In the progress zone, it's not just about moving forward. It's about being intentional about where you're going and who you're becoming along the way. So if you find yourself in that space when you're doing the work, but something feels off, this is where the shift starts. Start by asking a different kind of question. Instead of what should I be doing, ask yourself, if nobody saw this, would I still want it? That question tends to cut through a lot of noise because it removes the validation. It removes any pressure and it leaves you with something a little more honest. And then start paying attention to how it feels to move forward. Progress isn't always easy, but there's a difference between challenge and constant resistance. So notice what gives you energy. Notice what feels heavy and notice what feels aligned and what feels forced, because alignment has a different feel to it. It still requires effort, but it doesn't feel like you're constantly pushing against something. And over time, you start to realize something else. If you don't take the time to define what success means to you, it's easy to fall into chasing whatever's around you. If you don't decide what success means to you, it's easy to spend years chasing a version of it that doesn't actually fit your life. So maybe progress isn't just about more. Maybe it's about better, more clarity, more alignment, and more intention behind what you're building. Because at the end of the day, you don't just want to move forward. You want to feel like where you're going actually makes sense for you. And if something feels off, that doesn't mean you failed. It might just mean it's time to adjust direction. So here's something to sit with today. At some point, when things are quiet, ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? And just give yourself a minute with that, because sometimes that question opens up more than you expect. If this is something you've been thinking about lately, and if you've been in the space where you're doing the work but questioning the direction, that's a big part of why I wrote The Progress Zone. It goes deeper into this idea of not just moving forward, but making sure you're moving forward in a way that actually aligns with who you want to become. If you want to explore that more, I'll leave a link in the show notes for the book. And just remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, taking action, and getting just a little bit better every single day. We'll see you next time inside The Progress Zone. Thanks for joining me in The Progress Zone. If today's episode gave you a spark, share it with a friend, subscribe, or leave a quick review. And remember, progress isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. I'm Jody Donaldson, and I'll catch you next time inside The Progress Zone.